There it is.
Tell me what to do
Hello, everybody.
to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Here we go. Greetings, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, coming at you live right here from North Texas. I see Jason Nepstad. Good to see you first up to bat again, Jason. Been kind of missing hanging out with you, brother. Got a fun show lined up tonight. I was thinking about a topic today, and I was talking to the girls, and we've been getting quite a few calls from people that want to stock their ponds and lakes. So I thought I'd talk about that. I see Tim Stewart. I'll see Tim next week. There's Wayne Lancaster. I bet he and Josie are hanging out. Looks like Homer Midwell. Haven't seen Homer before. Glad to see you. Glad you're here. Robbie Shell, one of our fish food kind of guys. Robbie just switched jobs. He's kind of got some cool things going on. There's Josie, Ron Perello, and Tom Blaisdell. Good to see you guys. I thought tonight I'd talk about stocking ponds and lakes. It's fall. The temperatures are beginning to drop. I see Wyatt checking in. Wyatt's getting ready to stock a brand new pond. He's pretty excited. Jason Jones. Okay, guys, you know the drill. Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date and lasts a year. That date lasts about just a few hours, you know. So, full of nuggets. Way more nuggets than you get at McDonald's on one of those kid meals, I promise. This is full of good nuggets. $35 a year. If you guys will please put hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section, click like, and share this to your timeline, you'll be eligible for a drawing for yes, there it is, a Pond Boss hat and a Pond Boss mug. Say it, Josie, that knows how to. Wayne's laughing right now. I can hear Wayne laughing at Josie. How to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. We don't know how it does, but it does. There's David Schneiderman checking in. I'm glad to see him. Got lots of folks checking in already. Glad to see you guys. I'm going to do a little refresh on my laptop so I can see who all is checking in. Ron Perello ordered a 2-year subscription yesterday. Thank you very much. Those subscriptions are what fuels the economy, along with some advertising revenue to make Pond Boss be able to do what we're doing here. That plus our sponsorships from guys like David Schneiderman with Easy Doc. If you're looking to buy a dock, talk to David. He'll give you some great advice, and he may not be the guy to sell you the dock, but he might be, you know. So he can give you some good, solid advice, as well as our other sponsors, Purina Mills and Texas Hunter Products. So let me see here. Holy cow, I got it. I found it. Here I am right there online right now. Bigger than Dallas. Holy cow, am I on the right one? Yep, there it is. Stocking a pond. Good gosh, we got people going on. Tim Stewart. Yo, that's right. We're going to be talking about yo-yos next week and the way that we stock them in ponds and lakes. Let's see here. Danny Mack. Good to see Danny. Danny, we're going to miss you at the Pond Boss, at the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. Believe it or not, Danny, you will laugh your butt off, but when I made the announcement last week that we're going to get to go spend time with Jimmy Houston, Tim Stewart called, and so did Jacob West, and so did Bobby West. They're coming back. They were here last year. They're coming back. So we got a totally different program lined up this year for the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology, and we are full up. We might be able to take 1 or 2 walk-ins, but y'all are not going to be staying with us. You'll be off-site if you want to come. Bill Russell, good to see you. Kim Moore from Central Illinois. Hola to Josie. Yes, sir, and I got to spend some time talking to Wyatt the other day. I think we got him figured out. Ed Brewer from South Carolina. Let's see, John Funk, mid-Michigan. Roller coaster weather. Pond temperatures are already 50 to 55 degrees. Man, that's crazy. Are your fish feeding? Just nod your head, or no. They're probably slowed way down. Chris Folkers, hearing the difference in recommendations for grass carp per acre amount these days. Ponds in Iowa. You know what? Let me just start off with that, since that one's pretty easy. You know, here's the way I want you guys to look at fish. And I got several stories in my mind that I want to tell you if I get to it. So, here comes Leanne. What happened? Do you have a drawing? Jeremy Duckworth. Phew, she just handed me the drawing. Jeremy Duckworth, you won a Pond Boss mug that knows how to keep hot things hot, cold things cold, and a Pond Boss hat. I can't believe the girls are working late. They're tormenting each other in there working late. That's pretty funny. Chris, talking about grass carp. Here's the way I see things, from fertilizer to herbicides to fish to fishing tackle. Everything is a tool that fits into your tool management toolbox. Fish are the same way. triploid grass carp are a tool. Now, what their use is, I mean, you're not going to go get a hammer to drive, a little claw hammer to drive stakes into a railroad, crossing. You're going to go get something that can drive those big stakes. So you got to pick the right tool for the right circumstance. When it comes to choosing grass carp, you got to understand what they'll eat. They won't eat cattails. They won't eat lily pads. They'll eat coontail and bushy pondweed, although they'd rather eat bushy pondweed way more than they would rather eat coontail. And they'd rather eat American pondweed over bushy pondweed, and they don't like coontail as much, but they're going to eat it. So what my point is you need to understand what that tool does. So triploid grass carp, in terms of a stocking rate, what I do is I go estimate the volume of vegetation that's there based on percentages. So in other words, if we're looking down on top of your pond, and like Wayne and Josie's pond over in Bosque County, that thing was probably 60% covered with bushy pondweed. If I were to prescribe triploid grass carp for them, I'd say, you know what? We probably ought to start off with 3 per acre to gain control, although it may take 18 months for them to gain control. So the number of grass carp is going to be based on the kind of plants that you have, whether they'll eat it or not, and how quickly you want control, and if you're willing to deal with the repercussions of stocking too many to gain rapid control. So oftentimes I'll say, you know what? Let's stock them in at 3 per acre. Expect a little bit of attrition, like maybe one every couple of acres is going to get eaten or disappear or something, go downstream, whatever. And then if you want to gain control of the plants that took 5 years to get like they are now, use a little herbicide to knock them back. Now, of course, this time of year, we're getting ready to go into winter. Plants are about to go dormant. If you're going to treat any plants, you need to get it done, because when they stop growing, then they're not going to take up the contact killers, and you're not going to have the success you're looking for. So let's see here. And I am going to talk about stockings of different fish. Tom Blasdell had to miss last week, but he also watches the tape version on YouTube. Isn't YouTube cool? We like YouTube. Mike Cottrell needs some rain for food plots. Yeah, Palapena County kind of needs that. There's Dave Weber checking in from northeast Kansas. John says his feeding has slowed way down. I would expect that to happen. Blair Ulrich, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, you got it. There's Jacob West. We'll see Jacob next week. I love Jacob and Bobby and the whole West family. They're just stellar people. Just stellar people. Well, let's see. Danny Mac's not laughing because he's going to miss not being here next week. There's Doug Brown. He and I've been here carrying on a conversation. Doug stocked his pond, and I can tell by the way that he writes about it, he's very passionate about it. I love to see that. I love to see good energy when people are taking care of their ponds and lakes and being good stewards of their water. David Kent checking in from St. Genevieve, Missouri, got his first issue of Pond Boss last week. New convert. All right. We're preaching the gospel of pond management, and you've come down the aisle. That's great. Any way we can help you, let us know, David. Jonathan Stoddard fished the pond last weekend to call some bass going into the fall and winter. That's smart. If you cull going into winter and you can relieve your pond of some of the fish that are less healthy, meaning underweight, that leaves more food for the remaining fish that are more healthy, which is going to increase their odds of survival through the wintertime. So let's see what else Jonathan says here. Way less bites for both bass and bluegill. Yeah, it's because the water temperature is dropping down. Mid to upper 70s. Although in the mid to upper 70s, you should be able to get some bites. Now, let's see. You're in Quitman. That's East Texas, near East Texas. Should the bass still be pretty active with the cooler weather and fattening up? Yes, absolutely. With water temperatures in the 70s in Quinlan, Texas, you should be seeing tremendous activity. Now, you might need to change your baits, to kind of match the hatch. Or, if the fish have the chance to be deeper, then throw out a square bill crankbait that goes down 6 feet. So you really kind of got to get into their zone. But if you can get in their zone, they're going to eat. They're going to eat like crazy. Jason Rutledge, pond is on day 3. That's cool. I love that. So here we go. Now I'm going to talk about stocking a pond. And it's really, I'm going to start off with a story. I give these pond management seminars, been doing it since 1995 regularly. I'll give 15 to 20 of them per year, except for 2020, and 2020 doesn't count for anything. Nothing. 2020, bye. Let's fast forward to December 31 and say goodbye to this one. But I was giving a speech I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago at a Purina dealer, feed store. And this guy kept interrupting me. And sometimes when somebody interrupts me, it's a little irritating, but this guy was just passionate about what he was doing. He kept, well, I did this and I did that. Well, I was talking about feeding fish. That was the topic. And I said, with these new feeds that are out there, like the Aquamax lineup, those feeds convert 1.3 to 1, 1.2 to 1, depending on the fish species that you're feeding and how you're doing it. The feed conversion rates have changed a lot, which means there's a lot less waste. The feeds are more efficient, they're more nutritious, and the fish gain more weight. So he said, you know what? I've got this pond, 3-acre pond. It's just overcrowded with bass. And so I went and bought 100 pounds of fathead minnows, and I put them in there. Well, I just got through telling him that the largemouth bass typically convert forage fish 10 to 1, which that's the minimum. If they're going to just try to maintain their weight when they're overcrowded, it's going to take way more than that just to maintain their weight. But to gain a pound of predator fish, or even a non-predator fish, has got to eat 10 pounds of bait fish just to gain 1 pound. So he said, so I put I bought 100 pounds of fathead minnows and I put them in my pond to feed my bass. And I said, well, did you take out any bass? He said, well, I hadn't. I just wanted to feed them to make them gain more weight. He said, so are you telling us that I put in 100 pounds of fathead minnows and I'm going to get 10 pounds of bass gain? I said, that's what I'm telling you. Because when you put 100 pounds of fathead minnows into an existing pond that's overcrowded with bass, there's not a snowball's chance that they're going to be able to reproduce and survive. Ain't going to happen. So he says, so wait a minute. He said, so what would you do? I said, I'd go catch some of those bass and eat them by candlelight because you got a lot of money in them. I said, you spent $10 a pound for those minnows, didn't you? He said, yes, I did. He said, I spent $1,000 on those minnows. I said, whoa, and you're going to get 10 pounds of bass. He said, if what you're saying is true, yes. I said, okay. He said, how should I have spent that money? I said, for a 3-acre pond, you could buy a Texas Hunter feeder for $850, pay some freight on it, and then spend $150 on fish food, and you'd be stunned at how many fish you could raise in your pond from that, because if you feed your bluegill, they're going to gain more weight, they're going to have more babies, they're going to supply the natural food that you can't get by trying to money whip a pond, trying to stock it with bait fish. So I'm going to tell you that story, and I'm going to lead up to several things here. Let me see here. I got a few things coming in here. Let's see. Mike Cottrell, with this up and down the weather, should I be running the aerator 24/7? The answer to that is, I'm going to tell you this. Run your aeration systems now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until your water temperature hits 55 degrees. Once it hits 55 degrees, it's going to be saturated with oxygen as much as it can get from the top to the bottom. And then you're going to be going into the winter with healthy water. There's no reason to keep aerating much longer than when your water temperature is 55, unless you're going to have a few days where it's going to warm up above that. Because now keep in mind, here's a little lesson about water. Water is an amazing substance. God knew what he was doing when he made water. Water at 39 degrees is its most dense. So as water cools down from 90 to 80 to 70 to 60, it gets tighter. Its density increases. So it's heavier. When it gets heavier like that, its affinity for oxygen goes up. So as the water temperature cools, it can hold more oxygen. So when you hit 55 degrees, a lot of the aerobic bacterial activity is going to slow way down. So as long as they've got some oxygen at that water and mud interface, you're still going to get some decomposition of organic matter. But 55 degrees is kind of that magic number. And I'd shut it off at 55 and kick it back on next spring when the water temperature is 55 going up. I see Tron and Madonna. Hey, Tron and Madonna, good to see you, dear. Let's see here. Todd Austin, you got the deal. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like. Share this to your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing that Jeremy Duckworth got for a Pond Boss hat. Pretty cool hat. Adjustable. And a mug that knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. Plus, when you subscribe to Pond Boss online, in the note, just say, hey, I saw the offer for the lures. Texas Hunter Products sent us several packages of these lures. They're worth like $53 I don't know why they put $53.58 on here, but that's what they did. $53.58 retail value. So anyway, a bunch of cool fishing lures. We got a couple different kinds. As soon as we get to 10 subscriptions sold online where people have made notes, we'll have a drawing for 2 of these kits. So you got a 20% chance of winning, which is better than trying to win a Corvette at $100 a lot. Let's see here. Tom Blasdell, excess grass carp are fairly easily removed by bow fishing. Easy for you to say that. If you cannot do this for yourself, I would bet that you have a neighbor or an acquaintance that bow fishes that will be happy to help you out. You know, my deal on overstocking grass carp is once they're there, they're going to live to be 15 years old. And if you don't want to deal with trying to get them out, then start off low, and then if you need some more later, add them. You know, but it took several years for that pond to get that way. Holy cow, we're already 16 minutes in. I haven't even talked about stocking fish yet. There's Joanne Pillafont. Steve Lewis. Joanne, good gosh, I hadn't seen you in a while, girl. Steve Lewis checking in from Hot Springs. David Schneiderman says he fished for April stock tilapia last week. You know, what happens with tilapia, people stock those in the springtime to eat algae and to reproduce. And David stocked some of those last April, and he's catching some. And when he stocked them, I bet you they were 1/4 pound a piece, probably about, 8 or 9 inches long. And now he's catching some. They're 2.5 and 3 pounds. That's great. And they're very, very tasty. The bass will have a feast in a couple of weeks, because what happens with tilapia this time of year, when the water temperature starts to drop, they slow down. They get real sluggish. And the small ones, the bass will just gorge themselves on those tilapia. And the big ones that they can't eat, they'll die, and you'll see raccoons and, in some cases, bald eagles. If you've got bald eagles, I've got customers that stock tilapia just so they can see the bald eagles eat the dying tilapia in the fall. It's pretty funny. So look at there. Let's see here. Yep, Danny Mac. Let me see what we got going on here. I'm kind of getting behind. There's Jeremy. Hey, Jeremy, make sure that we have your address. If you're a Pond Boss subscriber, we've got it. If you're not, send us an email with your address so we'll know where to send your goodies. Let's see here. Caught mini bass that were 130 plus relative weight. Dadgum, very few calls. Keep putting them back. Yeah. And you know what? Here's the deal on that, David. If you're catching bass with relative weights that are so high, throw them back. Now, if in your situation, and I'll tell you what, in most people's situation, if you're catching bass that are under about 90% relative weight right now, that's the ones you need to take out. Because they should have enough food going into the winter. They should be at least 90 and above. If you've got 130, that's stellar. Stellar. All right, there's Tony Sutton. And Ron's in Virginia. Danny Mac. Let's see here. I need to talk about the topic at some point, y'all. Danny Mac's well-fed fish, Cumberland's bluegill and channel cat are far beyond the 90th percentile in length and weight for being 3.5 years old. Have been adding feed-trained F1 bass and hybrid stripers, hoping to make a difference in the bass. Yep, you will. And you know the size pond you've got and you're feeding them, they're going to do great. Okay, so let's talk about stocking a pond. I mean, the fall is that's a great time to be stocking fish. One of my, I'm not going to call it a pet peeves because, well, I am. It's a pet peeve. Is people would just go out and randomly buy fish to put in a pond. And you don't do that. Don't do that. It's you're throwing good money after a bad opportunity. You can quote me on that. Good money after a bad opportunity. So if you've got a brand new pond, here's the way I'm going to tell you. You need to have your goals in mind up front, straight away. What are your goals? And then what kind of timeline are you expecting? Then that's going to tell you how many of what size fish that you need to stock in part. Now, a brand new pond, you're going to stock totally differently than you are going to stock an existing pond. You know, I had a guy call me a couple of days ago. He says, hey, Bob, I got your number from so-and-so. I need to buy 1,000 small bluegill, and I want to buy 500 small red ear and 25 pounds of fathead minnows. So in my mind, I'm thinking he's getting ready to stock a brand new 1-acre pond. So I said, okay, that sounds good. We can probably figure that out. Tell me about your project. He said, well, my wife and I just bought this place, and it's got an existing pond on it, and the bass are overcrowded. They're not growing very good. I catch a bunch of them, and they're like 10 or 15 inches long, and they're skinny. Well, automatically throw the brakes on, because what's going to happen if you put 1,000 little fingerling bluegill about that big into a pond full of overcrowded bass? they're going to get eaten. And he's going to spend $500 on those fish, $700, whatever it is, and he's going to be giving his fish this little scientific term called a snack. Don't do that. In order to stock a pond, I'm going to take you in a couple of different directions. If it's a brand new pond that's never had any fish stocked in it, start off your forage fish this fall. Now, be absolutely certain that there are no fish in it. Don't guess at it. Don't assume it. Be certain of it. So if it's a brand new pond that was built this summer, it's got enough water going into it. And how much is enough water? If a pond has got 8 to 10 feet of water, covers half the surface acre going into a rainy season, then stock it with your forage fish. Now, the forage fish you stock is going to be based on your goals and your timeline. Then the traditional stocking is to stock fingerling bass at a rate of somewhere between 500 and 1,000 per acre, fathead minnows at 5 to 10 pounds per acre, red ear sunfish at 250 head per acre. Now that's in southern ponds. Northern ponds, totally different. You may be looking at stocking pumpkin seeds, some bluegills, depending on your goals. If your goals are to raise smallmouth bass, you probably don't want to stock bluegills because they're going to outcompete smallmouth bass in northern waters. So here's my point. Before you stock any fish, do your homework. If you've got a brand new pond, you need to come up with a stocking idea and a stocking program that will get you where you want to go in the timeline that you want. I mean, I've got guys that say, hey, Bob, I don't even buy green bananas. I don't want to wait for them to get ripe. Well, those guys are in a hurry. So they're going to want to stock a variety of sizes of forage fish, allow them a few months to get established, and then stock the predator fish on top of that. 25 years ago, there were just some real standard rules of thumb of stocking fish. You stock fingerlings into a brand new pond, let them grow up. In 3 years, they begin to mature. By year 4 or 5, the pond is maturing. By year 7 or 8, it's stellar. By year 9 or 10, it's declining. And then you kill the fish at year 10 and start over. Well, there were several reasons for that. First of all, that's what the science said to do back then. And also, it's because the availability of fish wasn't like it is now. We can go get fish now from fish hatcheries and other sources of bigger fish. I mean, there's folks out there that will sell big bluegills and sell feed-trained largemouth bass and larger hybrid striped bass and things like that. So you've got better sources so you can make different decisions. So based on your goals, choose your stocking plan. And I'm going to circle back on that. Let me go back down there and see what all we got going on here. Let's see here. We got John Henry's checking in. Zach Vaughn. Hey, there's Ron Ardoin. Got to talk to Ron on the phone today. Tom Blasdale is having trouble finding a fish dealer in southern Illinois that can supply hybrid stripers this fall. How far or how long can you haul fish for stocking in bags in the bed of a pickup truck? When it's cool, now if you're in southern Illinois, I'd be looking at, you know what, southern Illinois, you ought to call Jones Fish Farm over in Cincinnati and see what they've got. They're not that far compared to other places. Of course, you could go directly to the source. Your question is, how long will they last in bags in the back of a pickup? If wherever you're buying them, if they know that, they can package them where they'll live 12 hours in a bag. But you'd want to carry them like inside of a cooler or inside of buckets and keep their temperature stable as you go. But the standard rule of thumb is 6 hours in a bag is about max, because they're giving off ammonia, using up the oxygen. But they could cut the numbers in half, stock them in that bag, and they'll last longer. But I wouldn't give up on suppliers. I'd be asking some of the fish trucks that come through your town if they can get them for you. And I'd be looking for other sources. Spend a little time. I'll tell you what, go to the Pond Boss forum, pondboss.com, click on Ask the Boss, and pose that question there. And you're going to get some answers, because there's some people in the St. Louis area, there's some people in northern Arkansas that can go to southern Illinois. Heck, you know what? The Herman brothers up in Peoria, they're moving hybrid striped bass all the time. So check those guys out. There are sources where you can get those fish. There's Doug Brown. Doug been messaging me today. Let's see here. Yep. Okay. So Scott's talking about hybrid stripers with Joneses. Doug Brown, thanks for the idea of the warmouth today. How many F1s Florida to add mid-October to 3 acres? 3 females, Florida, no bass in the pond. I'd wait. I'd stop. You know what, Doug? If I understand it right, your forage fish are not totally established. If they're not, wait till next year and stock your largemouth bass. And then those rates look a little bit low to me. 10 F1s and 3 female Floridas. Well, and that depends on what size fish. Be sure your forage fish are established. No bass in the pond other than 75, 34-inch average striped bass added September 9. Okay, you know what? I think you need to make sure you've got the forage fish established before you do it. Let's see. Vito, will a new quarter-acre pond support largemouth bass and catfish or best only stock bits? Vito, we're going to be seining your bluegill Saturday morning. So you can come help do that if you want. It's really fun. And we're going to do it at my house so we can load your bluegill up and go get them stocked. A new quarter-acre pond will support largemouth bass and catfish. Start with bluegills and catfish. Do the bass later once the bluegill have begun to reproduce. And I'll get American Sportfish to get you some channel cat and some fathead minnows. They're now they're moving fish, so they're ready to do that. I'll see if we can round you up some of those, but we can get your bluegills Saturday. Because that's what we're going to do. We're going to seine fish. Okay, it's almost 7 o'clock. I need to get back on this topic. So anyway, like Vito's got a quarter-acre pond in his backyard. It's a focal point for his whole family. The kids love to swim in it. And I've been promising to get him some fish. The water's just been too hot. Now it's cool. So now we're going to go get him some bluegill to get him started. There's some bluegill that I've raised at my house and some out here behind. We got 6 hatchery ponds behind the office. So we're going to get him some fish. Let's see. Harrison Davis. Howdy, Mr. Pond Boss. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm rolling, man. I'm rolling. So, no, establish your bluegill first. Okay, so here's the rule of thumb for stocking a pond. You got to establish the forage fish first. If you don't, your predator fish will overeat that food chain. So when you're stocking a brand new pond, the mission is to stock some bait fish, then give them time, nutrition, fertilization, fertile water, fish food, Aquamax 500, whatever you're doing, to get their numbers up. And then you come in after these numbers get up there, like late next spring, early summer, stock largemouth bass. So your food chain goes like this, then the bass are growing like crazy, and after about 18 months, you're here. And after about 2 years, you're still here. And as you go into the 3rd year, when the bass start to reproduce, then your forage fish begin to drop. When that happens, that's a trigger to let you know that it's time to start culling some of these overproducing largemouth bass, mostly. So it's a harvest time. It's time to think about taking some fish out after year 3. So stocking the pond, you want to establish the bait fish. Now, what happens if you've got an existing pond, it's already got a bunch of fish in it, and you want to restock it? Well, look at it like this. If you live in an apartment complex, there's no vacancies, and somebody wants to move in, where are you going to put them? So if you've got a pond that's basically balanced, and you want to add some fish to it, especially predator fish, like you say, okay, I want to add some F1 tiger bass and increase the genetics. You need to make room for those fish. You need to be sure there's enough food for them to eat and minimize the competition so they can grow well. So harvesting fish is going to be a big, big deal, even when you're considering stocking fish into an existing pond. So now let's say you buy a piece of property. This happens all the time. Hey, Bob, I bought this piece of property. I've been fishing. All I'm catching are little dink bass. They're about 10 to 13 inches, 14 inches long. They look like a long-distance runner from some foreign country. Okay, what do I do? Well, chances are those fish that are there are overcrowded, have overeaten the food chain, and have been doing that for several years. That means their top-end growth potential has been compromised. So you harvest as many of those as you can, and once you start getting their numbers down, that's when you come in and add some bait fish. Now, it's not smart to go in and add a bunch of bait fish that these starving little bass can eat in a moment. You know, you got to, and one thing you got to always remember, you got to have good, healthy water. You got to have the right kind of habitat. You got to have the food chain for whatever you're stocking. So if you're going to stock a bunch of bluegill, you need to have something they can eat. Do you? If you don't, think about that. Set up a feeder and get ready to feed them. And then you need to also have a harvest program. So if you know that your bass are crowded, it doesn't make sense to leave them like that and then stock some bait fish, because if the bait fish grow and your bass are crowded and your bait fish grow, then your bass are still going to be crowded. They're just going to be a little bit bigger and more crowded. So cull some of those fish and then stock bait fish that are big enough to escape being eaten. In this case, with an existing pond where the bass are overcrowded, spend this fall culling bass. And then see if you can find some adult bluegills. This time of year, it's easy sometimes to find some 4, 5, 6, 7-inch long bluegills. They're pricey, but buy them. If you can feed them, get them into the winter with good growth rates. Coming out of the winter, they'll reproduce when you see a few bluebird days, and your food chain will start kicking back in gear. So don't just go buy some fish to stock an existing pond until you know what's in that pond. And once you know what's there, then make a plan. And I'll tell you, another one of my little pet peeves is this happens a lot. This happens 3 or 4 times a year, where I'll get a call from somebody who says, I just got through building a brand new pond and I want to stock it with fish, but I only want to stock half the numbers because we went way over budget building the pond. No. Just because you spent more money building the pond, that's not a legitimate reason to not stock the pond properly, because you're going to get one chance to do it right. So if you got a brand new pond, even though your funds may be short, go to your mother-in-law and tell her you'll mow her grass for the next year for an extra $1,000 or something. Where I'm going is, when you stock it the first time, stock it right. Because listen to this. When you stock a pond, that's going to be the best chance that you're going to get great results 4 and 5 years down the road. And you won't know it until year 3. So stock it right in the beginning. Don't cut corners. Just because you went over budget on that, don't shave the budget on the fish. Because if you do, and don't let the neighbor bring you a bunch of fish because he's a nice guy. Why would you want to stock his cull bass? If he don't want them, why do you want them? You got to get that biological balance going early on. You got to get the bait fish in early on, get them to reproduce. So you're going to have the food chain and set the table, open the cafeteria door to lubies so that your game fish are going to be able to thrive long term. You don't want to bring the high school football team to the cafeteria every day and the truck's not coming to keep the cafeteria full. So your pond's the same way. You want to generate enough food to support that fishery. Now, time is money. So if you find that your budget's a little bit short, then what you do there is you can cut the numbers back, but you're going to increase your timeline. If you're going to stock half the number of bluegill, you're going to wait twice as long to stock bass. So if you have to do that, get your fathead minnows, get the bluegill, get the red ear in this fall, but don't plan on stocking bass until 2022. You got to let that food chain build up, or something like that. So now here's the moral of the story. There are a lot of different ways to stock ponds nowadays. We've got more choices. We've got copper-nosed bluegill. We've got native bluegills, fathead minnows, golden shiners, largemouth bass, F1 tiger largemouth bass, northern largemouth bass, pure strain Florida largemouth bass. We have hybrid stripers. We've got red ear sunfish. We have crappie for the right circumstances, which most of the time it's not the right circumstances. There's hybrid sunfish, hybrid striped bass, hybrid crappie. So you've got a bunch of different kinds of choices that you can make now, and there's a variety of sizes. You can now buy hybrid striped bass that are 6 to 8 inches long. You can buy bluegills that are that big. You can buy largemouth bass that are this big. 25 years ago, you didn't have all that. Now you got a lot of choices, but it's incumbent on you to figure out the very best way to do it that matches your budget and your timeline. So here's the moral of this story. Then we'll switch gears and go to some other topics. The moral of the story is you need to think through the best way to stock your pond, and don't just randomly go buy any fish. Don't do that. So create your game plan, find a supplier that you trust, Now, one of the things I love about fish farms is they have fish available. One of the things I don't love about fish farms is sometimes they're going to try to push fish they need to sell. Your job, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Your job is to create your game plan, then go. We just had a disconnection for a minute. Your job is to create the game plan, then find the supplier that will support your game plan. You know, and I'm not telling you don't take the advice of a fish farm. Sure, take the advice of a fish farm, but that doesn't need to be the only advice that you take. Listen to mine. You know, spend time on pondboss.com. Go through a bunch of these videos, you know, and custom design your own stocking plan. That's a big deal. Okay, now I'm going to scroll back up here and see what all we got going on here because there's a bunch coming. See, Toronto Madonna, good to see her. We stocked, Jason Epstead, we stocked wipers about 15 months ago. The majority around 3 pounds, but a couple of small ones have been caught around a pound or so. Could this be male versus female? Absolutely, it sure could. That could be male versus female, Jason. I tell you what it can also be. Look at it like this. Look at fish like you'd look at a litter of puppies. Like there's a guy in Texas that is convinced his bass are genetically superior than all the rest of the fish on the planet. They are not. He was in the right place at the right time to get the best of one fish farmer's best fish of that moment, and he's turned it into an industry. Well, here's the way that works. So let's take his two best fish. Say he's got a 3-pound male Florida bass and he's got a 13-pound female Florida bass, and he crosses those two, and they have 250,000 babies. Half of them are boys. They don't count because they're not going to get very big. So now if you got 500,000, now you got 250,000 girls, and say they're hatched in a 20-acre lake, one spawn. How many of those are going to survive? Not many. So the odds of a fish surviving that has the propensity, the aggressive nature, you know, all the genetic traits to grow huge, to be able to grow huge, is low. It's astronomically low. So here's the way that works. Look like a litter of puppies. You hear people talking all the time about I got the pick of the litter. Well, why didn't you pick the runt? Every litter has a runt, and every litter has 1 or 2 or 3 picks of the litter. Those picks of the litter, their personality is different. Their growth is different. Their size is different. You know, they're not shy. So fish are the same way. You know, there's a percentage of those females that are going to have it, whatever that it is, if they don't get eaten, and if they have the right food at the right time every day for their entire lives, they're going to grow huge. If they don't, they're going to be average, just like every other fish. You know, so where I'm going is with the wipers, it's no different. It could be males versus females, but it could be that those 1-pounders are just less aggressive, don't feed as heavily. They're out trying to compete for live feed, where those 3-pounders are feeding at the fish feeders. You know, and so that doesn't mean that those 1-pounders won't hit 10 or 12 pounds. They can. You know, now if they're boys, they're probably not going to get that big. So the size can be sex related, but it can also be just behavioral. There a certain percentage of fish just are not going to be aggressive, and they're not going to grow fast and not going to grow big. It's because they're passive. Let's see what Dave Weber's got to say here. Dave says, if you were stocking a new 1-acre pond and had a choice between 100 5 to 7-inch bluegill or 250 hatchery fingerlings, which would you choose? I'd choose both. I would choose the fingerlings, and I'll tell you what, if I could get 100 5 to 7-inch bluegills, I know several things are going to happen. Those 5 to 7-inch bluegills are going to dominate the beds, which means that those smaller fish are going to have to grow bigger than they are before they can mature sexually and start kicking those fish off the beds. So you're going to automatically get bluegills bigger than 5 to 7 inches, where when you stock these 5 to 7s, they're not going to grow much. They're going to totally focus on reproduction. So when that happens, their growth rate plummets. So when you stock those 250 hatchery fingerlings, they're going to have the best chance at growing larger than those 5 to 7s, and then you'll have cycles of reproduction. So you got 2 age classes. Actually, you've got those 5 to 7s are probably 3 years old, and those fingerlings are this year's. So you still have a gap, which means those 250 babies are going to grow up fast. They're going to gain weight fast, and the best of the best are going to fill the gap between those and those bigger fish. And those are going to be the fish that are going to have a chance to get huge. So the best of both worlds in that case is stocking that 105 to 7-inch bluegills. They're going to reproduce to give you your third size class of fish or your third age class of fish. While the 250 smaller ones are going to grow up and begin to reproduce when they're 2.5 to 3 inches long. They're going to add mass, and then the babies from the 5 to 7 inches are going to be right behind them. So you're going to build a food chain faster. So I'd say do both of those. That 105 to 7-inch bluegill, Dave, is probably going to cost $350, and those 250 are going to cost $100. I do both. Spend that $350 and don't go out to eat for 3 nights like I do. Drew, hey, this is a great topic. Love it. And I just had this conversation. Stock it right the first time and patience to do it right. That's great wisdom right there. Drew Hay is coming to the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology next week. I got to know Drew a couple of years ago. He and his dad and his cousin have a pond management or a pond building business, and they're growing into the pond management side up in Pennsylvania. So I'm looking forward to seeing those guys. Let's see. Andrew Willis says, what's your take on hybrid bluegill that don't reproduce? Is it okay to mix with copper-nosed bluegills? Here's what I'm going to tell you about that. Like I was talking about grass carp earlier, you know, look at each fish as a different tool in your pond management toolkit. They all serve different purposes. A hybrid bluegill's job is to grow fast early, get to be hand sized. You know, they'll get to be, you read all this nonsense about them getting to be 5 pounds, baloney. I think one did that once back in the 60s maybe or 70s. But they can get to a pound. They can get 3/4 to a pound. And they're real aggressive. They're easy to catch. They're rapid growing for the first year and a half, 2 years. Copper-nosed bluegill will outgrow them. It takes them about 2 years to catch up, and then they're going to surpass the hybrids. Here's the thing about hybrids. Hybrid bluegill, one of the nicknames is Georgia Giant. They're a cross. I've got to calm my throat down a little bit. They're a cross between female green sunfish and male bluegills. That first generation is the hybrid bluegill, and they're available in a bunch of hatcheries around the nation. Their job, and 95% of them are males. That's why they don't reproduce. And those males can't reproduce with their own females because the females' eggs are not viable. But a male can cross with a bluegill or another green sunfish or other species, so they can do that. So if you want to use them for forage fish, they're not a good choice. Their mouths are bigger than bluegills, but not quite as big as a green sunfish mouth. So they're predators. They're going to eat baby fish coming off of beds. Their purpose is to provide aggressive sunfish fishing, typically in a catfish-only pond, or if you want them in a bass pond, it's for quick catching of sizable bluegill or sizable sunfish. That's what they're for. My take is, if you want to mix them with copper nose, it's okay. But when they cross with copper nose, those babies don't reproduce either. But copper nose are not just going to go cross with the hybrids. They're going to cross with copper nose. So by about year 3 or 4, if you've not restocked hybrids, by about year 5, their numbers are going to dwindle, and the copper-nosed bluegill are going to overtake, which is normal because copper-nosed bluegill, especially in the South, they're going to reproduce 4 or 5 times a year. And they're really good at that reproducing thing. And that's part of the reason we use them as the backbone of the food chain. Copper-nosed bluegill are native to Florida, Georgia, Alabama. They've been transplanted throughout the South, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. They don't do so well above a line, say from just south of Oklahoma City, just north of Memphis, going up to north of Nashville, and then make a hard curve up the Atlantic seaboard to New Jersey. North and west of that, they don't do as well. They don't like cold weather. I don't know if they start shivering and quit growing or what, but they don't do nearly as well in cold water. All right, bring me some more questions. I'm kind of running out of topics here. Let me see. Let me scroll back and make sure I didn't miss anything. Hey, Vito, if you're off Saturday, really seriously, you need to come. It's really, really fun to get out there, especially when it's cold, which the water's not that cold yet. But, I mean, I'm 65. If I get in it, you get in it. I just won't stay long. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions that I've missed. If I have, ask them again. Other points about stocking fish. I think it's real important to get your fish from a local source. I think if you live in Kansas, go find Hartley Fish Farms. You know, they've been there forever, since the 60s. You know, the boys there, they're getting old now. I remember when they were in high school. Those guys are really, really good at what they do. So where I'm going is buy your fish locally if you can. You know, now I know that guys like Jones, they raise a bunch of their fish, but they also buy fish from some of the bigger hatcheries in Arkansas. There's some fish that's okay to transplant from other states. There's some fish that are not. So I would at least ask that question. Let's see here. Okay, Vito's going to come hang out. That's good. I'll call you. But of course, you're probably saying, oh, yeah, sure he will. I'll call you. All right, Andrew Willis, what's your take on hybrid? Okay, we got that. Dave Weber, you mentioned hybrid crappie if you educated. Okay, here's the deal on hybrid crappie. One of the hatcheries over in Arkansas, Bobby with Malone Fish Farm. Bobby is a true biologist, and as well as the fish farm manager. He loves messing around with cutting edge things, and there were a few years that he did some crosses between black crappie and white crappie, and he got some true hybrids. But as he started putting them out in different lakes and then studying the returns, he was a little disappointed because they reproduced. Because the goal of these hybrid crappie were to be able to stock small waters with a crappie. Because I hear it all the time. People say, I want to stock crappie in my half-acre pond. No, you don't. They don't work in a half-acre pond. When somebody tells me they want crappie, they're not saying, hey, listen, I want something that's going to jerk my rod out of my hand. They're saying, I want something I can eat. Well, bluegills serve a purpose for that. But what Bobby was trying to do over at Malone's was to come up with a hybrid that doesn't reproduce so that we could use them in small waters. And what you stock is what you get, like hybrid stripers. But they reproduce. So one thing he also tried to do was to get them and make them triploids, like they do with the grass carp. That didn't work either because they're too tender. You know, so going through that process of adding a third set of genes, they were killing too many fish. Well, he tried stocking a few hybrid crappie, and he hadn't totally given up on it yet. And I'm not sure that he's got them, but they don't reproduce as much. So there's some cases where if they don't reproduce as much, and you've got a good healthy bass population on them, maybe they'll work. So that's kind of the backstory on that. Let's see here. Harrison Davis, if your goal is to grow the biggest largemouth bass possible out of your pond, would you recommend stocking Florida strain largemouth bass for your largemouth bass population? You know what? That's a complicated topic, but we got time and I'm going to take it. Let me see what else we got. Andrew says, where's my fishery? I live in North Texas. However, if you'll go to pondboss.com and click on the resource guide, in the resource guide, we've got people that we've vetted, we've known for years and years and years. There's hatcheries scattered all over the nation that are reputable, that we know, and happy to refer you to anybody in the Pond Boss resource guide. So go to pondboss.com, click on the resource guide, and go through that. Or anybody that wants one, we can send you a resource guide from the office that's a printed copy if you want a printed copy. Harrison, I'm going to circle back here. Let me see what Jason says. What quality should I look for if we stock bluegills? Should I look for a hatchery that understands genetics? You know what, Jason? That's a great question. Most hatcheries don't really drill down into genetics. But I tell you what you can do. And this is a good tip, everybody. If you're wanting to stock bluegill this fall, ask the hatchery what sizes they've got and if they're this year's fish. If they've got this year's fish that are 3.5 inches long and this year's fish that were hatched in the spring that are 1 inch long, buy the bigger ones. Because those are going to be the ones that are superior coming out of that fish hatchery. Remember the dog litter thing. If you can buy some of their best of the best, ask that question. See if you can buy some fish that they can grade off, all these fish farms have graders where they separate the bigger fish from the smaller fish. If you can get some of their faster growing fish, your odds of getting genetically superior fish go up. and nobody asks that question. Ask that question. Jeff Wallen says, when should I move my aerators out of deep water for winter? Central Illinois. I'll tell you what I'm going to tell you there, Jeff, is pull the aerators into shallow water when your water temperature's at 50. And you know what? 55 is safe. Pull them shallow at 55. Jeremy Duckworth, what are your thoughts on adding striped bass to an older established pond? Will adding them in there throw off? No, you know what? Typically, if you're going to add some hybrid stripers into an existing bass population, they're going to fill a different niche and they'll come to the feeder most of the time, depending on how many you stock. So they're going to go out and live in open water typically, where all your other fish are going to live peripherally. So it's okay to add them into an overcrowded bass lake as long as they're big enough that the bass don't eat them. Let's see here. What else we got? I'm scrolling down here. Shane McIntyre, on the topic of green sunfish, I always wondered what makes them different from bluegills at times. They seem more aggressive, but they also seem to like rock structure a lot more than, say, brush, and I don't see them in as bigger groups as I do bluegills. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Green sunfish prefer different habitat than bluegills do. Green sunfish love to get in the crevices of rocks. They love to hide in that. And like when you're running your electrofishing boat, you're going to see more green sunfish hiding in riprap along the dam than you're going to see bluegill. The reason their numbers are low is because they only reproduce once a year. In the south, bluegills spawn 5 times. In the Midwest, 3 times. In the north, twice, maybe once. So they can just outnumber the green sunfish. So there's my skinny on that. I am going to circle back to the Harrison's question in a minute. Let's see here. Okay, holy cow. Okay, I'm going to go back and read that question again. I lost it. Hold up. Stay with me. If your goal is to grow the biggest largemouth bass possible out of your pond, would you recommend stocking Florida strain largemouth bass only for your... You know what? I'm going to tell you this. Now, I'm assuming this is a brand new pond being stocked for the first time. I think it's smart to mix up the gene pool. I think it's smart to have some F1s. I think it's smart to have some pure strain Floridas. Now, it's easy to debate me on this. People can make some valid points about one or the other. I mean, I hear that. I hear it all the time, and I can't debate it, but I'm going to tell you my opinion. My opinion is that a pure strain Florida bass has got a little better chance of growing to its maximum size than an F1 does. Now, I can't prove that, but I know this. Your odds of catching an F1 are way higher than trying to catch a pure strain Florida bass. Now, one of these Central Texas lakes, that's all he has is pure strain Florida bass, and you got to work hard to catch one of those beasts. You know, but you can do it. You just got to figure out how to do that. So, my answer is hedge your bets by stocking F1s and pure strain Florida bass. And I see nothing wrong coming in year 3 and adding more pure strain Florida bass or more F1s. Because those F1s can't reproduce to be what they are when you stock them. So if you want more F1s in the future, you got to stock more. But here's my answer. My answer is both. Stock some F1s and some Floridas. The biggest secret to growing giant bass is having good, clean water that stays that way and is not a stressor, and having an ongoing, vibrant, always producing food chain. Now, if you've got that, the consequences are going to be big bass. But nature's always going to throw a hiccup at you. It's going to be overcrowded bass. It's going to be a missed spawn. It's going to be a flood right after the bluegill spawn. Something's going to happen. As long as you're paying attention to that and you can judge it or have a biologist help you judge it, then your odds of growing more big bass go up. Okay. Let's see here. Shane, we talked about that. What else we got? Drew Hay. Bobby Gatlin. I have a 2-year-old tank. Holy cow, you must live in Central Texas, west of I-35. Have a 2-year-old tank. First year I put about 100 fathead minnows and 25 to 30 perch. Perch here, that means bluegill typically, if you bought it from a fish farm. If you didn't, it could be green sunfish, it could be long ear, it could be warmouth. It could be red ear, it could be Rio Grande cichlids. It could be a lot of things. I'm going to assume that you put bluegill in there. Perch is like saying cow in Texas. Last week I put in 100 channel catfish fingerlings and 3.5 pounds of fathead minnows. What else do I need to do? I'm down there twice a week, and I do feed floating catfish food. Okay, first of all, verify the perch you put in. Make sure they're bluegills. If they're not bluegills, go stock some more bluegills. And I would stock, you're not saying how big your pond is, so I'm going to tell you that you should stock 500 bluegill per acre into that circumstance. And feed them. Feed them a good fish food. That catfish chow is a good fish food. It's a supplemental fish food. It's not going to make them grow big or grow fast. Go buy a bag of Aquamax, Purina's Aquamax Sport Fish MVP. Now you're going to pay $45 for that bag of fish food compared to $18 for that floating catfish food. But it's like steak compared to donuts. You know, if you really want to make those fish grow big, grow fast, feed them that. The catfish will do fine on the catfish food. But if you want those bluegill to get in there and reproduce, you know, maybe feed them some of the catfish food, let the catfish eat what they want, and then throw some of that other fish food in there for the bluegills. Do that. Vito, Pond Boss Live is the best show of the week unless the Cowboys are winning. Well, you hadn't seen that in 3 or 4 years. And you know what? I think there's a debate coming on, so I've kind of been debating myself. I think I'm winning. Okay, so I love that, Vito. Yeah, the Cowboys did. I heard I don't know, I've quit watching NFL. I'm kind of done with that for a while. Ron says, how would you start a tagging program? Could you tag fish as you catch them a couple at a time? Yeah, you can do that. Sure. And it's always good to do them when you're electrofishing. Yep. Yeah, you can tag 10 to 20 at a time. Yeah. Take the hurricane surviving fish and breed those tough fish. Yeah, tag them as you get them. You know, electrofishing, you can just tag more of them. You know, and one thing, when I'm tagging fish, I want to be picky about which ones I tag. You know, if I see some fish that are thin, I'm probably going to call them and not tag them, you know, depending on the age of the fishery. Okay, hey, Bobby, 3/4 of an acre. Yeah, you need to stock more bluegills. Stock another 300 to 500 bluegills, fingerlings about that big. They're like 35 cents a piece. You know, $100. Throw $100 of bluegill in there. Make sure they're bluegills. Do that. All right, folks, hey, you remember the drill? $35 a year right here, Pond Boss Magazine. This $35 that you're going to be spending, you get an electronic version as well as a printed version. We'll send you a copy of the resource guide as well. Your resources are these videos as well as pondboss.com, Ask the Boss. We've got every one of these videos is archived with a link on the Pond Boss website. We have hundreds of free articles, got a lot of free stuff, but for $35, cheaper than a Friday night date, really, come on, $35. Sign up, guys. And a bunch of you have. Like Wyatt, there's Wyatt. Wyatt just bought one of my books and been able to talk to Wyatt. So, $35 a year, you guys sign up. I appreciate you guys hanging out. Let's see, we got one more here. Wyatt's the one at me. He says, what's the best way to tell if the bluegill and other forage have established in the spring, just new offspring? Yeah, you'll see. What you'll see in the springtime, you'll see these bluegills on beds in shallow water, and then you'll start seeing aquatic plants grow a little bit. Then you start seeing little bitty fish. Now, fathead minnows kind of glide through the water. Little baby bluegills dart through the water. So start looking for little bitty bait fish. Now, you're probably not going to see them until where you are over near Abilene, Texas, Wyatt. You're going to start seeing baby bluegills. Now, if you stock them this next week like you want, you'll start seeing some baby bluegills probably in April. And if you're not seeing them then, you'll see them toward the end of May, 1st of June. Now, one thing that's kind of fun is to go to Walmart, go to Bass Pro Shops or Academy, buy a little short 20-foot seine, tie broomsticks on each end, and you and your buddy next spring late, like in May, just drag it through the shallow waters, pick it up and see what you got. And if you've got some fish in there, well, your fish are reproducing. And you'll be able to tell the difference between fathead minnows and little sunfish. So, there you go. I'm going to sign off, guys. Be sure to subscribe to Pond Boss. We got a lot of resources out there for you. Thanks for tuning in. I'm not sure. Hey, next Wednesday night, we're going to have a house full of people. So I'm going to do my broadcast live from Lusk Lodge, 2 with everybody that's attending the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. So you're going to get to meet some new faces. I'm going to have several guests on there. Drew, hey, you're probably going to be on the show, buddy. So get ready. You're going to be on the other side of the camera. So, folks, I've enjoyed it. Tune in next Wednesday. We're just going to shoot the breeze with a bunch of guys. It'll be a lot of fun. So until next Wednesday, I'm going to tell you adios and thanks for tuning in. Let's go watch the debates. Bye.